My wife spent a full month using cold silence to push me into compliance. Instead, I rediscovered my interests, filed for divorce, and finally chose myself. It happened on a Tuesday evening. I came home from work, and the house was completely silent. Not a calm quiet, but a heavy, intentional one. She sat at the kitchen table, scrolling on her phone, as if I didn't exist. "How was your day?" I asked, while setting my keys down. Nothing. Not even eye contact. "Everything okay?" Still nothing. She stood up, walked past me like I wasn't there, and went upstairs. The bedroom door shut with more force than necessary. Here's the thing about my wife. She's always been dramatic, but this felt different. The night before, we'd had what I thought was a basic conversation about dividing household tasks. She had complained about doing laundry while I was at work, even though I handled the yard work, car issues, and most of the bills. When I suggested balancing things more fairly, she got upset. But I never imagined she'd take it to this level. For the next 3 days, she stuck to a strange routine. She made breakfast only for herself and left my dishes untouched in the sink. She washed her clothes and left mine in the hamper. She ordered food for one and ate it in front of me without saying a word. The most frustrating part? She talked to everyone else normally. Her phone would ring, and suddenly she was cheerful, laughing with her friends or family. The moment she hung up, I disappeared again. By day 4, I understood what this really was. It wasn't about our disagreement. It was control. She was using silence as a tactic, expecting me to break first, to apologize, to beg for attention. I'd seen her do the same thing to her sister once at a family event. Her sister spent the whole night trying to make peace while my wife pretended she wasn't there. But she misjudged something. I wasn't her sister. On day 5, something revealing happened. I was watching a game in the living room when she came downstairs. She stood there for a full minute, clearly waiting for me to notice her or try to start a conversation, to show her silent treatment was working. When I didn't look up, she actually cleared her throat loudly. I kept watching the TV. She stomped back upstairs, and through the thin walls, I heard her on the phone saying, "He's being so stubborn. He's not even trying to fix this." That's when it became obvious. She wasn't quiet because she was hurt. She was quiet because she wanted to condition me, using silence to get complete control over the household and over me. The problem with her plan was that I was realizing something. The house was peaceful. No constant criticism about the dishwasher. No complaints about my TV choices. No lectures about leaving a coffee cup out for a few minutes. For the first time in years, I could relax when I got home. By the end of week 1, I made a choice. If she wanted to play games, I'd play too, but not the way she expected. There were things I once loved that I had slowly given up because of her constant remarks. Things that used to define me before I started adjusting everything around her moods. Music was a big one. I wasn't just a casual player. I used to be a professional musician. I played saxophone in a jazz band for 5 years before we married. I had a full keyboard set up in my home studio before it became her craft room, a space she almost never used. But over time, every time I practiced, she'd comment, "That noise is giving me a headache. Do you have to play the same song again?" And the one that hurt the most, "Are you sure you used to be a musician? It doesn't sound like it." Those comments cut deep because music wasn't just something I did, it was part of my identity. But slowly, I played less. Eventually, my instruments were buried in the closet under her boxes of seasonal decorations. Well, if she wasn't going to acknowledge me at all, then she couldn't complain about noise. On day 8, I pulled my saxophone from the closet. The case was covered in dust. When I opened it, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: excitement. Pure, simple excitement about making music again. I set up right in the living room, where she'd have to pass by to reach the kitchen, and I started playing. I'll admit, I was rusty. The first few notes were rough, and my embouchure was way out of practice. Normally, she would have taken the chance to make some cutting remark about my playing, but she couldn't break her own rule now. I heard her pause at the top of the stairs. After about half a minute of basic scales, her bedroom door slammed hard enough to shake the house. I smiled and kept playing. The next day, I added the keyboard back into my routine. I set up in the dining room where the acoustics were better and spent an hour working through old jazz standards as my fingers slowly remembered the chord progressions I used to play effortlessly. She came downstairs while I was in the middle of take 5, and I watched her from the corner of my eye. She paused, wanting to say something, her face growing red. When I hit a slightly off note in the bridge, her mouth opened like she was ready to deliver one of her usual critiques. But then she remembered her silent routine and closed it again. Instead, she grabbed her purse and walked out, shutting the door behind her. I finished the song and realized I felt more like myself than I had in a long time. By day 10, I had built a routine that would have been impossible just 2 weeks earlier. Morning coffee while practicing keyboard scales. Evening sessions with my saxophone. The house was full of music again, and it was clearly affecting her. The silence she thought would make me crave her attention was instead helping me reconnect with parts of my identity I had forgotten. Every morning, I set up my keyboard in the living room and worked through jazz progressions. The muscle memory came back quicker than expected. My fingers landed on familiar chord changes, and soon I was playing arrangements I hadn't touched in years. She'd come downstairs for her coffee, see me playing, and her jaw would tighten. But she couldn't say anything without admitting her strategy wasn't working. The breakthrough came on day 12. I was practicing a challenging saxophone piece with fast runs that required accuracy. I repeated the same 16 bars for about 20 minutes, gradually increasing the tempo. Every time I made a mistake, I stopped and restarted. She was in the kitchen, and I could sense her irritation growing. Each time I hit a wrong note, she slammed something down a little harder than necessary. A mug, a plate, the fridge door. Then it happened. During a difficult chromatic run, I completely fumbled it. The notes came out as a harsh, discordant mess. She couldn't hold back. "Jesus Christ, are you sure you used to be a musician? That sounds like a dying animal." The words hovered in the air for 3 seconds before she realized what she'd done. Her eyes widened, and she covered her mouth as if she could take them back. I stopped playing and looked at her calmly. "Oh, so you can hear me? Interesting." She turned bright red, stormed upstairs, and slammed the door. I immediately heard her on the phone, speaking quickly. I couldn't make out the details, but it was obvious she was upset with herself for breaking her rule. What struck me was that after weeks of silence, the first thing she said was still meant to belittle something important to me. That told me everything about where the marriage was heading. I picked up my saxophone and played the passage again. Perfectly. The next few days were revealing. She struggled with her own silent treatment. It had always been her method for control, but I wasn't reacting the way she expected. Instead of seeking her attention, I was improving without her input. I expanded beyond music. Remember the woodworking bench I set up in the garage 3 years ago? She complained it was messy, noisy, and pointless. Well, with no criticism coming my way, I turned on the table saw for the first time in months. The sound filled the house, and her bedroom door slammed again. But I kept working, building a small bookshelf I had planned forever. The satisfaction of creating something with my hands, combined with the freedom to do it without constant judgment, was energizing. I also reclaimed the TV. For years, she controlled what we watched. Reality shows, romantic comedies. If I wanted to watch a game, I had to wait or negotiate. Now, I walked in, grabbed the remote, and watched whatever I felt like. She'd see me watching sports, then leave the room immediately. The most telling moment came on day 16. I was in the middle of an evening practice session, working through Miles Davis arrangements. I was completely focused. She came downstairs planning to walk to the kitchen, but stopped when she saw me playing. For a moment, her expression changed. It wasn't frustration, almost recognition. Like she remembered the version of me she married. But then her face hardened again. She turned and went back upstairs. This time, I caught some of her phone call. "He's doing this just to spite me. Playing that instrument every day. He knows I hate it." There it was. She didn't dislike the music because it was loud. She disliked it because it represented something she couldn't control. Something that made me happy without involving her. That night, after she went to bed, I sat in the living room with my saxophone across my lap and realized something important. I had spent years trying to be the husband she wanted and had forgotten who I was. The silent treatment wasn't punishment. It was freedom. For the first time in our marriage, I was living like myself in my own home, choosing what I enjoyed, and she couldn't stop it without ending her own strategy. I played one more song, a slow ballad that echoed through a house where my music had been unwelcome for years. I fell asleep peacefully. By day 18, I wasn't just practicing music. I was reclaiming every part of my life I had given up over time, and she watched all of it in silence, stuck in a game she had created. The living room was first. For years, she arranged the furniture around her preferred TV setup, angled awkwardly so watching sports meant twisting your neck. That changed. I spent Saturday rearranging everything. Couch facing the TV directly. Coffee table placed comfortably. Saxophone stand next to my chair. When she walked in and saw the new layout, she stood still for a full minute. She wanted to complain, but couldn't. She grabbed her purse and left for 3 hours. When she returned, I was relaxed in my chair, watching the game with my feet up, something she always criticized as disrespectful. She stood there expecting guilt, but I didn't look away from the screen. Next was the kitchen. She liked the counters empty except for decorative items. My coffee maker had to stay in the pantry. My vitamins were hidden in a cabinet. That changed too. I set up a proper coffee station. Coffee maker, grinder, beans, all easily accessible. My supplements got their own space. I even brought out the blender she banned because it was too bulky. Every morning, I made my coffee openly, and she had to walk around it. The frustration was clear, but she couldn't say anything. I also began cooking the meals I enjoyed. For years, dinner was whatever she wanted, usually trendy recipes that looked nice but lacked flavor. If I suggested something else, she rejected it. Now, I made exactly what I liked: spicy Mexican dishes, flavorful Indian curries, simple comfort foods like burgers, things she had banned. She'd smell the food and linger nearby, wanting some, but couldn't ask. Instead, she'd make a plain salad and eat it while the house smelled of real food. Garage became my personal space. I set up my woodworking tools and spent evenings building things I'd postponed for years: workbench, shelves, a guitar stand. The noise filled the house each night. I'd see her watching through the window, pacing, irritated. But she couldn't complain without ending her silent treatment. One evening, while I was working on a small jewelry box, she appeared in the garage doorway. She watched for a few minutes, then left without speaking. The next morning, I found a passive-aggressive note. "The noise from the garage is disturbing the neighbors." I read it, smiled, threw it away, and spent an extra hour using the loudest tools I had. By day 22, the house felt completely different, like mine again. The music, the comfortable setup, the freedom to eat what I wanted, the ability to enjoy my hobbies without interruption. All of it brought something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Actual, steady peace in my own home. I woke up without anxiety about her mood or what I might do wrong. Instead, I looked forward to my coffee, to practicing, to working on whatever project I wanted. The silent treatment she intended as punishment had become the most freeing experience of our marriage. I was living like a bachelor, but without loneliness, because I had finally rediscovered myself. And the more I reclaimed, the clearer my next step became. She thought she was training me to comply. Instead, she was showing me what life looked like without her constant interference. The difference was impossible to ignore. Day 25 changed everything. I was in the garage adding the final touches to a cedar jewelry box when I heard her on the phone again. But this time, the conversation was different. It had been almost a month, and he was acting like none of it mattered. If anything, he seemed happier. Can you imagine that? I was giving him the silent treatment, yet he walked around the house like he'd hit the jackpot. She paused, listening. "No, you don't get it. He's playing music all day, moving furniture around, cooking whatever he wants. It's like he's pretending I don't even exist." Another pause. Then her voice tightened. "Of course it bothers me. This was supposed to make him realize how much he depends on me. Instead, he's acting like he's better off without me." That was the moment I realized she had unintentionally revealed the real issue. This wasn't about our argument. It wasn't about chores, respect, or any of the surface-level problems we'd been circling for years. It was about control. She'd been using emotional pressure to keep me compliant. And when I finally pushed back over something small, she escalated to the extreme. The silent treatment was her way of saying, "See what happens when you don't do what I want?" But instead of breaking me down, it strengthened me. Instead of making me crave her approval, it reminded me what it felt like to live without constantly chasing it. I put down my sandpaper and walked into the house. She was still on the phone in the kitchen, pacing with nervous energy. "I don't know what to do. Tomorrow makes 4 weeks, and I was planning to end it then. But if I break first, doesn't that mean he wins?" She saw me in the doorway and quickly lowered her voice. "I have to go. He's here. ... She hung up and looked at me like she expected I'd finally give in. When I simply grabbed a glass of water and returned to the garage, her face dropped. That night, after she went to bed, I sat in the living room with my saxophone and made a decision. If she wanted to play games, I'd give her one she wouldn't forget. But I needed to prepare. The next morning, I took a personal day from work. After she left for her job, I drove across town to a law office I found online. The attorney, a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in divorce, asked how she could help. I need to understand my options. My wife has been giving me the silent treatment for almost a month, and it's made me realize some things about our marriage. I explained everything, not just the silent treatment, but the years of slowly losing myself, the constant criticism, the way I'd stopped doing things I enjoyed to avoid conflict, and how I felt like a visitor in my own home. "It sounds like you've already made your decision," she said when I finished. "I think I have, but I want to handle it properly. Clean, fair, and final." We spent 2 hours reviewing everything: assets, debts, the house, our separate careers. Without kids, and with mostly separate finances, it would be straightforward. She prepared the paperwork. "When do you want these served?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning, day 29. I want it to be memorable." On the way home, I stopped at a florist. I needed something symbolic, flowers that were beautiful but sent a message. The clerk recommended white roses. "New beginnings," she said. Perfect. That evening, I practiced longer than usual, letting the music fill the house one last time. She was upstairs, likely planning her dramatic return to talking, convinced she'd won her psychological battle. She had no idea what was coming. I spent the night writing 2 notes. The first took several attempts. It had to catch her off guard, without giving everything away. The second was simpler and more final. As I sealed the documents in an envelope, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: complete clarity. Not fear, not second-guessing, just certainty. The silent treatment was meant to show me what happens when I don't follow her lead. Instead, it showed me what life could look like when I stopped managing her emotions and started prioritizing my own needs. Tomorrow, she'd learned that her month-long attempt at control had backfired. Instead of creating a more obedient husband, she'd pushed me to walk away entirely. I went to bed early, setting my alarm for dawn. Day 29 would be unforgettable. Day 29 began like any other morning, except I woke with absolute focus. I started the day the same as I had for weeks: music. I played a slow jazz piece in the living room. The notes drifted upstairs. She was probably lying in bed, planning her triumphant return, imagining how relieved I'd be when she finally broke the silence. She didn't know what she was walking into. After practicing, I arranged the white roses in a vase and placed them on the kitchen table with the first note. The handwriting was clean and intentional, the message crafted to surprise her. Then, I continued my normal routine: coffee, newspaper, another round of saxophone. She came downstairs around 8:30, dressed for work but moving cautiously. She was preparing for whatever explanation she intended to give. Maybe a pretend test she claimed I'd passed. She stopped cold when she saw the flowers. I watched from the living room as she approached the table. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the note. "Thank you for the best month of our marriage." Her expression shifted rapidly: confusion, then a smile as she misinterpreted the message, then confusion again, then another smile as she assumed I was finally admitting she'd won. She looked oddly satisfied. "You think this is funny?" she snapped, breaking her silence with a voice full of anger. "After everything you've put me through?" I kept playing, not looking at her. "I'm talking to you," she said louder. "Don't ignore me now." I finished the song, set down my sax, and looked at her calmly. "Oh, so you can talk now? I wasn't sure you remembered how." Her face reddened. "This isn't a joke. Do you have any idea what you've done to our marriage?" "Actually, I do." I stood and walked into the kitchen. "I've had 28 days to think about what our marriage has become, And you're right, it's not funny. She looked confused again, unsure if this was the reaction she expected. That note isn't sarcasm, I said. I truly mean it. These 28 days have been the best our marriage has ever been. What are you talking about? Think about it. No tension, no constant criticism, no eggshells, no justifying why I want to play music in my own house. For the first time in years, I was able to simply exist without managing your emotions. She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. But I also realized why these days felt so good. Not because we weren't talking, because I was finally myself again. And that made something clear. I walked to the counter and picked up the second envelope, placed earlier next to the coffee maker she always complained about. If 28 days without your input made our marriage better, imagine what a lifetime could do. I handed her the envelope. Her hand shook as she opened it. The moment she saw the divorce papers, I watched the realization hit. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. She found the second note clipped to the back. It was short and direct. Now, let's make it the best year of my life. The silence that followed wasn't like the past month. It was. She looked from the papers to me, to the flowers, back to the papers, struggling to make sense of any of it. This is insane. Over one argument? Over me not talking to you for a few weeks. This isn't about one argument. It's about what these 28 days taught me. You wanted me to see what life was like without your attention. Mission accomplished. I liked it more than I expected. She slammed the papers on the table. You can't end our marriage because I gave you the silent treatment. I'm not ending it because of the silent treatment. I'm ending it because the silent treatment was the first time I felt free in my own home. And that tells me everything I need to know. I picked up my saxophone case and walked toward the door. Where are you going? To work, like always. The difference is, when I come home, I won't have to guess your mood or what rule has changed. I'll just come home and live. I paused at the door. By the way, your silent treatment ends today. You can talk as much as you want, just not to me. The divorce was finalized exactly 90 days later. Those 3 months felt like the best part of my adult life. She tried everything. Tears, bargaining, anger, promises. She even said I could play music whenever I wanted, as if that had been the issue. But during those 28 days, I learned something important. I learned what peace felt like, what waking up without anxiety felt like, and what it meant to live in my own home without fear of conflict. When I signed the final papers, I returned to a home that was truly mine. No more eggshells, no more emotional management, no more losing myself trying to keep the peace. That evening, I set up my keyboard and saxophone in the living room and played for 3 hours. Music filled every corner of the house, and for the first time in years, no one complained. 6 months later, I joined a local jazz ensemble. We play at small venues around the city, and I rediscovered why music meant so much to me. The other musicians were shocked I'd stopped for years. How do you stop making music? One asked. I didn't have a good answer, just a promise to never do it again. My home is now exactly what a home should be. Comfortable furniture arranged how I like it. A music room where I can practice freely. A garage workshop where I build things that matter. A kitchen where I cook food I enjoy. Sometimes people ask if I miss being married. Honestly, no. I don't miss that marriage. I don't miss criticism disguised as concern. I don't miss manipulation labeled as communication. I don't miss feeling like a visitor in my own home. What I have now is better. A life shaped by my own values, interests, and decisions. Friends who aren't filtered through someone else's approval. Hobbies that bring joy instead of stress. The silent treatment she intended as punishment became the greatest gift she ever gave me. It showed me freedom. It reminded me who I was beneath all the compromises. And when she finally spoke on day 29, expecting a broken man, she found someone else entirely. A man who remembered his worth and chose better for himself. The last thing I told her during the divorce was simple. You wanted to teach me what life was like without your attention. Thank you. It was exactly the lesson I needed. Now I fall asleep to silence, not the manipulative kind, but the peaceful kind that comes from finally being where you're meant to be.